Hey guitar playing champions, want to learn how to easily play huge 2-step bends and 2.5-step bends and even maybe 3-step bends on the guitar? Grab your guitar and let's go. This is going to be a lot of fun. All right, so as you start playing these big bends like this, that's a 2.5-step bend. You want your fretting hand to be as relaxed as it can be. You want to use leverage and not raw power. No, you don't want to muscle this. You want to use leverage to bend the string that far. Why? Because what you play after the bend might require this hand to be really loose and relaxed. If you're playing a fast lick or something like that after the big bend, you need this hand to be relaxed. And if it's totally tense because you're using raw power, it's going to make it very difficult to go from the big 2-step or 2.5-step bend into some, scale run or arpeggio or whatever. So what we want to do here is use leverage, not raw power. All right, so when I'm bending a string, I don't do this. I don't use my fingers at all to push the string. Actually, my fingers don't even move. What happens is I use this part of my hand. If you make a fist, right on the side of this first knuckle, this part here goes against the guitar neck, and it doesn't move from that spot. And all we're doing is we're just turning our arm. So the string bend actually happens from the whole arm. It doesn't happen from the fingers or the wrist or whatever. So this stays planted. This is your pivot point right here, okay? And it's just like turning a doorknob, okay? But you imagine this is against the guitar, and now turn the doorknob, okay? That's how this movement works. So if I'm doing this, this stayed against the guitar. My fingers remain stiff. So I put the fingers together, kind of like this, or like this. And then you want to keep them in position, all right? You don't want this flexing here, all right? Now, when you're pushing up, we're just turning the arm. See, if you watch this here, you see the whole arm is moving. It's not this. Okay, it's not anything goofy with the wrist. It's simply using the weight and the leverage of the arm. And that is going to allow this hand to stay relaxed because all it has to do is hold the fingers in this position. And that's it. It's not using any muscle or any raw power. It's just the hands are stiff like a brick. And we're just torquing over the arm to make the big bend. And I make this point because, a lot of times students will ask me, how do you do those huge bends so easily and make it look so easy? Well, the thing is, I'm not using power, I'm just using leverage, and anyone can do this. So if you have strong calluses on your fingertips, okay, so you're used to, doing a lot of slides and bends, and the calluses are pretty hard, then after that, all you got to do is just get the leverage from your arm, and you too will be able to do these big bends. There's no big secret to it. You don't need a lot of power, okay? I'm not like extraordinarily strong or anything like that. It's just leverage. All right, so now what I'm going to do is demonstrate to you how I'm playing these 2-step bends, and we'll do it over the same track that you heard in the beginning. So I'm going to bend the A note to sound like C sharp. So from here all the way up there, and then I'll play a D note and bend that all the way up to F sharp, and then I'll play A again an octave higher and bend it all the way up to C sharp. Okay, now you're going to hear this in basically 2 stages. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bend up A to sound like B, and then from here, so it's A up to B, then from here B up to C sharp. I'm still holding the A note. I'm still on fret number 10 now. So it's A up to B, B up to C sharp, and then C sharp all the way down to A, and you can add a little vibrato there at the end. So it's happening in 2 stages. Stage 1, stage 2. You can think of like a rocket that's got like a 2-stage rocket. It's kind of like that. So let's hear this with the track. right, so there you hear those big bends in 2 stages. And again, it's A up to B, then B up to C sharp, still holding the A. So it's like a whole step bend and then another whole step bend stacked on top of each other. But altogether, it's still a 2-step bend because you're bending from 10th fret up to the 14th fret. And again, I'm using the leverage here. So I'm just torquing the arm over, okay? The fingers stay stiff. There's none of that, okay? It's just like this. And then we turn the arm again to get that additional whole step. So that's where the motion comes from. Now, before we go any further, I've got another video here on YouTube called String Bending Masterclass, Advanced Guitar Lesson. You might want to check that out because it goes into some other areas of string bends that we're not going to be talking about in this video. So that video plus this one go really well together. All right, so now let's talk about a bigger bend, a 2.5-step bend. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play the E note on the 2nd string. So that's fret 17. I'm going to bend this up to sound like A. So that's string 2, fret 22. So we're bending from here, fret 17 to fret 22. That's 5 frets. It's a big jump. And again, I'm going to do it in 2 stages. So I'm going to go from E, I'm going to bend up a whole step to F sharp. And while holding that bend up there, I'm going to go from F sharp all the way up to A. So it's another 1.5 steps altogether, 2.5-step bend. So let's check this out with the track, and you'll hear what I'm talking about. All right, so there you hear, it's E up to F sharp, and then from F sharp to A. Now when I'm releasing the bend in this particular case over this particular chord, I'm releasing from the A way up here all the way down, and then I'm playing D as the final note on the fret 15. If you're looking for more tips, some more advanced string bending tips, check out my video on YouTube called Advanced String Bending Tips that will go into more detail about some advanced technical things on bending strings that go beyond what we're talking about here today. All right, now the next thing I want to talk to you about is something I mentioned in the beginning, and that's controlling tension. Tension control. I don't mean string tension. I mean tension in your body and tension particularly in the fretting hand. Remember that when you're playing guitar, it's not all that common that the first note you're going to play is going to be a huge, massive bend, right? You'll probably play other licks or phrases or whatever, and those things will probably require your hand to be more relaxed and more loose. So then when you're getting into a big bend and you know it's going to be big and it's going to require leverage, remember, you don't want to tense up with your hand. All you want to do is get your fingers to be stiff, not like this, okay? Don't make a fist and be real tense. You're just making the fingers stiff enough so that the string will follow your fingers as the arm torques over and the fingers go up to the rotation of your arm. You don't want the string to slip under the callus of your fingertip, okay? So we're holding it here just to hold the string in place, and then the arm is the one that actually moves the string. So again, don't grip too hard as you go from a fast lick or whatever into a string bend. So when you're getting into it, don't use more force than necessary. And then when you get out of the bend, same thing. As you're releasing the bend down, you still have to maintain control over the string so it doesn't slip underneath your fingertip as the bend is coming down. But remember, you're just torquing your arm the other way. You're releasing the bend by turning your arm. We don't want to start moving our fingers to do that. And then once the bend is released, we immediately want to just kind of shake off any excessive tension so that when you go into your next phrase or next lick, particularly if that lick is difficult or hard or fast, you want this hand to be really relaxed as soon as possible. You don't want any residual force or tension to remain as you go into the next thing that you're going to play, whatever that might be, because then that's going to make the next lick that you play harder, and we want things to be easier for you, not harder for you. All right, now let's talk about how would you practice this stuff? How do you practice these ultra wide string bends on the guitar? And how do you do it so that when you're playing a 2-step bend or a 2.5-step bend or anything that's bigger than, let's say, a step and a half, how do you practice it so that the technique is there, you're not using too much power, you're using leverage instead of force, and that you're able to get the bend in tune so that the intonation is correct? Because if the bend is not in tune, then it just doesn't sound good. Okay, so let's start. We already talked about tension earlier. Let's talk now about keeping the bend in tune. All right, so there are some different ways in which we can do this. One way is to simply memorize what it feels like to bend a string up 2 frets or 2.5 steps on the guitar. It feels a certain way. You'll have to use a certain amount of torquing of the arm. And if you do this a lot, you'll learn to memorize, okay, this is kind of what a 2-step bend feels like. This is what 2.5-step bend feels like. This is what a 1.5-step bend feels like, etc. You've probably noticed that the difference between a half-step bend and a whole step bend certainly feels different, right? You got to torque over your arm, or if you're using your fingers, you've got to use more power there to go from a half step to a whole step. So if you've been playing guitar for a while, you probably have those feelings memorized, and that's probably helping you to get your bends in tune, or at least close to in tune, and then you use your ear to adjust, fine tune the bend as you're bending it to keep it in tune. Okay, so the first way, and actually it's the hardest way to accurately bend 2.5 steps or 2 steps, is just to do it by feel, where you know through experience how far the string has to be bent just by feeling it. Okay, now the reason why that's tricky is that every place on the guitar, that feeling changes as we move away from the 12th fret. So it's easiest to bend a string on fret 12. Why? Because there is the least amount of resistance in the middle of the string. There's less resistance here than there is as we get closer to the nut and closer to the bridge. So as you move away from the 12th fret, those bends get harder and harder and harder because there's more resistance on the string. Okay, why does that matter? It matters because it feels different on fret 12 to bend up 2 steps or 2.5 steps or even a half step than it does on fret 7 or fret 19 or whatever. As we go away from the center, the string bends get harder. You probably notice that if you're trying to bend a string down here on fret 2, it's a lot harder, right, than fret 12 or 13 or 14 or whatever. So the point is that trying to memorize how that feels will be different depending on the fret you're on. So you memorize the feeling here, then it's a slightly different here, slightly different here, slightly different here. That's why it's more challenging to do it that way. Okay. Now, fortunately, that's not the only way that we can ensure that the string bends are going to be in tune. It's the best way, but that's really the hardest way. Let me show you a little easier way, and that is to do the string bends in 2 stages, like I was demonstrating on this whole video. When you do the string bends in 2 stages, your ear has a little bit of a chance to catch up to the first stage. Let's say you're bending up a whole step, let's say. You bend up from there. You can probably do a whole step. If you're experienced, you can probably do it kind of by feel anyway and get it in tune or pretty close. And then you use your ear to make any slight adjustments. Maybe you got to bend slightly more or slightly less to keep it in tune. But at this point, if you're doing a 2-step bend, you're already halfway up, and you know that the halfway point is already in tune. Okay. Now in stage 2, of course, it's going to feel different because you need much more leverage to get from, a whole step to 2 steps. But the point is the midpoint, here's where we started, here's where you're at now, stage 1. Now, when you go from stage 1 to stage 2, up to from a full step to 2 steps, that's going to yet feel different, but the distance is now shorter from where it was in tune originally. So you were down here, unbent string, right? You go up 2 steps. It's a big distance to cover. If you go up in halfway, and now from here to here, that distance is shorter. So it doesn't make anything easier technically for what your hand has to do. But what it does do is it gives your brain a little time to catch up with your ear and how it feels, so that the halfway point's in tune. And now from this point to here, that distance is shorter now. So it's a little easier when using your ear to get that in tune. Okay, now the truth is we don't really want to have to rely on our ears. Why? Because if you bend a string and then you listen to the note to determine is it in tune or is it not in tune, what happens if it's not in tune? It's too late, right? Now you've got a note that's bent and it's out of tune. And if your ear is pretty quick, you can make the adjustment quickly and fast. It may only take, half a second or 200 milliseconds or something like that. But still, for that period of time, it is out of tune, right? It's a little flat or a little sharp. And we want to make that as smooth. We want to correct that error, that mistake, as smoothly as we can if there is one. Okay, so if you're bending the string and you're up 2 steps or 2.5 steps and you're thinking, oh, I can hear now it's a little flat or it's a little sharp, you want to make the correction very smoothly. So it sounds like you intended to bend the string maybe a little bit more, a little sharp, and then bring it back down in tune. Or the opposite. You intended to go just shy of it being in tune, and then you just bent it up a little more smoothly, seamlessly, so that it sounds intentional and musical, not like you made a mistake and now we're trying to fix it, right? We don't want that sound. We don't want everyone to perceive, oh, he bent the string, it's out of tune, and now he's trying to fix it because he goofed it up. That's not the sound we're looking for, right? We want it to make, first we're trying to get it in tune, but if we miss, we want to make the correction be musical in nature, so it's like, oh man, that sounds really cool. Yeah, it does. It's called a mistake, and I just fixed it, and I guess it was cool because I didn't advertise to everybody in the way that I tried to fix it that it was an error, and now everybody can hear that. Okay, so that's a kind of a subtle difference there between the two. So when correcting little flaws, make it musical and smooth so that there's an expressive element to it and not like we're just putting a Band-Aid on something that's broken. All right, so this video I made for you guys because some people were asking me in the comments of my previous videos about how do you do big, huge, ultra wide bends, 2.5 steps, things like this. So this video was made by your request. If you have requests for other topics, other videos, let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, no matter what it is. And if you have a question there, or if you've got a request, I'll be happy to make a future video for you on whatever that topic may be. Now, before we go, if you want to develop lightning fast picking speed, I'll show you how on my new free e-guide titled How to Build Lightning Fast Guitar Picking Speed. It's totally free. Click the link below to download your copy so that you can develop incredible picking speed even if you're struggling to do so or you've struggled in the past. And if you don't have a lot of time to practice, I'll show you some things that you can do to increase this speed in the picking hand without having to practice endless and endless hours every day.